out and everything. So the first thing I guess I'd start off with is telling you a little bit about our backgrounds and everything. I'll let Nick kind of introduce himself and tell you his work experience, where he's from. He's from University of Florida and everything. But if you want to kind of introduce yourself, Nick.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Nicholas Stubendorf. I graduated from law school in 2011. My first job after law school is coming to St. Petersburg to clerk for 4 judges at the Civil Circuit Court. It was my first experience coming over to the west coast of Florida. I'm from Jupiter on the east coast, but I loved it. You guys have a great thing going over here, and I've been here ever since. But getting to work with the judges, first job out of law school, was really valuable to my experience, and I know they have a great program here for you guys to do that, so I certainly recommend it. But it allowed me to kind of go behind in chambers with the judges and see what they really expect from the attorneys that are practicing before them. And it was kind of a good mentorship, leadership experience that I got to have because, after the hearings, you go back with the judge, and if the attorneys weren't prepared, they weren't doing what they're supposed to do, that's all you heard about. The judges, their judicial assistants, just back and forth about, this attorney did a great job, this attorney did a bad job, and, the word spread. So it really impressed upon me kind of the importance about being prepared for everything that you're doing. They talk about the law community being a small community and reputation matters. It really does. And that experience, getting kind of to see what the judges in the area expect, was a great kind of leadership experience for me. I did that for 3 years, and then my next job was working at the state attorney's office here in the 6th Circuit. I did that for 3 years. If anyone gets the chance to kind of intern there or do the CLI program, I recommend it. It's great. I'm sure Justin will tell you some more stories about that. That's where I met Justin, as well as our other partner, Kevin Coleman, working there together. And just real briefly, I guess the leadership type of experience that you get there is great, and it's important. And one thing about the way they do it is there's the head state attorney, then there's division directors, and it's kind of organized sort of by rank and file, and you do what the person above you tells you to do. You don't do anything that, without running it by people above you. And that's important too, because it just kind of keeps everyone, you're not going rogue, but it's helpful that you have people above you to kind of run things by, and you're getting good advice from the people above you. And so from there, I went and left after the 3 years and did insurance defense at a law firm in St. Pete. I don't know if, various 2Ls, 3Ls, if any of you have experience kind of working at a large law firm, but different law firms handle things very differently. Some are, fight with everything. We're going to object to everything. And fortunately for me, the one I worked at was more, let it slide. We try to get along with everyone. If you don't need to object to a continuance, don't object to it. And that really did have a profound impact on kind of the way that I like to practice law and the way that I do things, because getting out now, dealing with other attorneys, that's unfortunately not the way that they all do it. But, I think if I was with other attorneys that were more object to everything and kind of contentious, it would have definitely changed the way that I practice law for the worst. So anyway, did that for 3 years. And then Justin, who when he left the state about the same time I did, started his own criminal defense firm. Had the opportunity to go join up with him and try and bring personal injury and some other practice areas to his growing criminal defense firm. And knowing Justin from working closely at the state for 3 years, I knew that he was a great leader, and I wouldn't be kind of sending my family into a bad spot, just joining a law firm with some guy who I don't know and is going to, go rogue and do different things. So he's definitely a great leader. Fortunate, lucky to be partnering with him. And I might kind of sit off to the side and be a follower, let Justin tell you a little bit more about him.
So just show of hands, like anybody put any thought into like maybe you want to own your own practice someday, or go solo practitioner, or build up a firm? See a few hands. Okay, good. So what I'd like to do is kind of, again, I'll kind of relate this to leadership, but kind of give you a little bit of my story and how I got to where I am. Because I'm basically you guys in about 10 years. I've been a lawyer now 9, so about 10 years ago would have put me in my second year of law school. So, you know, and it wasn't necessarily something I set out to do, was open my own law firm and everything in the beginning. Going back to college, I went to University of Central Florida. I was an economics major. I was always very business oriented. I come from a family that was small business owners, but nothing to do with the law. There's no lawyers in my family. I had some interest in politics and things like that, so that's kind of why I went in that direction. After graduating from UCF with an economics degree, I actually moved to DC and worked for a congressman for about a year before I went to law school. And then from there, came back down here, went to Ave Maria School of Law down in Naples on a full ride scholarship down there. I'd never even heard of the school before that, and I know a lot of people, they're still pretty small school from what I understand. After that, while I was in law school, I always thought I, again, would go into something that was like corporate or business or political, is what I always thought, until I took trial advocacy. And I know you guys have a great like trial advocacy program here and everything. I love it. If you're not considering do it. Like, I fell in love with it, and I still love it to this day. Number one thing I want to do is be a trial attorney, and we go to trial a lot. We actually, me and Nick's claim to fame is we've never lost a case. Well, we were prosecutors and on the defense side for 9 years now. We won our last 9 in a row as a firm. So we're pretty good at it, and I got a burning passion for it, so definitely do it. But what you learn in law school and doing these competitions and stuff, it's not reality, right? So you're going to take these classes, people got their scripts, you learn the mechanics of it, and that's the great part of it, right? So you're learning the objections, the legal arguments, things like that. You get out in the real world, real life hits you, and you understand your witnesses are not going to be perfect. You're going to encounter all kinds of crazy stuff while you're there. Come back to that in a minute, but I kind of want to give you guys background and kind of build it up and how I got to where I was. So once I took trial advocacy, I knew right away I loved that. I wanted to do that. So I started asking my professors, like, where am I going to get the most trial experience right away? And, you know, they're like, you got to work for the public defender. You got to do be a state attorney. I mean, at the time I was like, I could never be a public defender. I'm going to go to the state attorney's office. I'll never be a defense attorney. Here I am all these years later. That's primarily what I do. But you know, I went to the state attorney's office and did a certified legal internship there. And that's a great experience here. And I know you guys here in Pinellas County, they have a great program. Does Fred Schaub, does anyone taking it right now? Is Fred Schaub still teaching that? I know he kind of retired. Fred is doing it still? Yeah, okay. What's that? Trial, okay. Yeah, so Fred's great. I know Frank, and I know Bernie before he passed away. He used to do a lot of it now too. I don't know how involved Bruce is with it, but either do that or do the CLI at the public defenders. I mean, either one of them. It's a great experience. It gets you in law school, being able to be in a real courtroom, get you in front of some judges, start building up a reputation. Long before you ever consider going out on your own and kind of building your own practice, I highly suggest going somewhere like that first. Go to the public defender's office, go to state attorney's office, go to a civil general litigation firm or something that's going to get you some experience. You're probably not going to get as much at a big law firm because they're going to probably have you do a lot of like the associate type work. So if you really want that real trial experience from day one, you can go to the state attorney's office and do that. I mean, I remember when I first started there, I think my second week I'm in a jury trial right away. So I mean, that's something you definitely want to do. It depends on where your practice area of law is too. And so that's another thing I would recommend is you really want to learn a particular practice area very well. And that's something where I stayed at the state attorney's office. I was there about 3.5 years. Worked our way up from, you know, being a misdemeanor line attorney all the way up into felony. And we were trying murder cases and things like that about 3.5 years in. That's the thing. You're going to get a lot of experience there. You're not going to see that as much probably with a big civil firm. You're probably going to get paid more, which might, you know, you got to balance that too. But, you know, you're going to want there and kind of get that real experience. A little bit how Nick talked about it too. Like when you're there is a command structure, which is great for kind of developing you as an attorney because you're going to start there and you're not going to have a huge idea of what you're doing, right? So like you're going to need some supervisors and friends that you'll make there that are going to be able to sit on trials with you. They're going to teach you some stuff. You're going to get more comfortable. And as you kind of develop from getting the mechanics of it and everything that you would get here in law school, once you kind of develop that, that's when you can start becoming better at being a good trial attorney. And then as that develops, even a misdemeanor, you should be able to become like what they call a lead trial attorney or an LTA pretty quickly, probably within your first year or so. And then you'll be the head of like a misdemeanor division. You'll have people underneath you. You're going to be helping them out and training them. And then you're going to still have supervisors above you. And the longer you stay there, obviously, the more you're going to move up kind of within that command structure, which kind of helps you develop as a leader, right? So you're going to, at the beginning, you're going to be at the bottom of the totem pole. You're going to kind of slowly move your way up, but then you're going to have more and more responsibilities that are put on you. And that helps you develop as a leader. I really wouldn't be able to do, what I do today, running a law firm and being managing partner, without having some of that, right? Because I gained that valuable experience of having people underneath you, talking to them, kind of, building that up. So after about 3.5 years, you do have a lot of guys there that don't move on and have been there for a million years, and you get to a certain point where there's a little bit of a ceiling, and you're probably going to have to wait years before you start getting promoted anymore. So that's when I decided to move on and then start and open my own firm. And I moved here, so I'm originally from Jupiter, Florida, as well as Nick. Originally, I actually didn't even know him until we met at the state attorney's office. But when you're, at the state, you start to make friendships with defense attorneys and stuff as well. And that's something too I would suggest. A lot of people are like, you have an opposing counsel or opposing party on it. You need to object to everything they do. You need to be hostile. You need to advocate for your client to the point where you're just like constantly pushing them back. I don't really agree with that. And I think that's a philosophy of our firm too, as Nick kind of talked about. You want to kind of get along with other people in the legal community there too, because one of the best things you can get as far as a compliment as opposing party is telling their client how good of an attorney you are. And then you never know in a year or two down the line when they're going to refer you a case because they have some conflict or they have some other issue or they can't take it or it's outside of their area of practice or whatever, and that's going to make you more money and more contacts, and that's going to build you up. If you're hostile and you're kind of always fighting with everybody, that's your reputation, right? So you're going to be known as the person in the legal community that's like that, and they're not going to like that much, right? So good luck with that. I opened up my own law firm kind of not knowing what I was doing. I came from like a family of small business owners, so I had some idea and some people I can look to as far as how to run a business and things like that, but no one obviously that was in the legal world. So when you're running your own law firm, being a good attorney is probably like 5th on the list of things you need to be good at. Number 1's probably salesman, right? So you got to be able to sell yourself and why the client should hire you. Especially if you kind of do what I did, where I'm not from this area, I don't have family here, I didn't have a lot of contacts. I'm starting cold out of the state attorney's office, never even having a client before. So again, a lot of those kind of reputation benefits I got out of it, of being a state attorney, being a good attorney, making friends with defense attorneys, things like that. That kind of stuff helps because then you can talk to other attorneys, you can talk to them about cases they may have a conflict, can't take one, they refer it to you. That's invaluable as far as like starting your business out. You also want to, you really need to go out into the world and try to build word of mouth more than anything. Another thing I do is something called BNI. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's like Business Networking International. It's a lot of just independent small business owners that meet once a week and you kind of pitch your business to each other kind of, and then you build up a reputation that way. Competing on like Google and commercials and stuff like that, unless you already have a lot of money before you even start a firm, it's hard to kind of purchase your way into the market and just build your business out of that, right? So the big thing is your reputation matters a ton. So being known by the judges, being known by other attorneys, having a good reputation, and then building it among people you normally wouldn't even know. Through like BNI, I've got to know a lot of like plumbers, electricians, random business owners. They got employees or whatever that have a divorce or commit a crime or get arrested or whatever, and so that's how you kind of build it up. And it really is, what's the expression? Catch more flies with honey than whatever. I forget what the saying is, but as long as you have a good reputation and you kind of building a good relationship with a lot of different people, that's the best way to do it. Like building up your network and getting business in there. So we developed it up into, I had it going pretty well on my own. So I was a solo practitioner, had just me and a paralegal, but I could kind of see after about 2 to 3 years into it that we had a pretty good structure of it. But it's hard to practice like multiple practice areas at the same time. So I was doing primarily criminal defense and then trying to do some other subject areas, but it's kind of hard to do that when you are constantly in court. So like if you're doing criminal defense, you're going to be in court probably almost every day, right? So then it's hard to really like develop a family law practice out of that, or it's hard to start getting like auto accident cases in and like developing those cases when you're in trial or in court or everything on a daily basis. So that's when I kind of reached out to Nick and Kevin, our other partner, and kind of got them to come aboard and kind of build out these different practice areas, right? And then once you kind of have that business structure in place, you can see how to replicate it pretty easily. So from there, we can start kind of rebuilding the same thing with like a family law practice, start doing it with auto accidents. And all of a sudden, over the last 2 years or so, since we've all been together, kind of just exploded the practice into probably 4 or 5 times what it used to be when I was doing it on my own. So that's kind of how we developed it, I guess, from there. I would, if going out on your own, if you're considering it, the main thing I would say is you got to have some kind of vision of what you're going to do, right? You can't just like open a law firm and like have no idea what it is that how you're gonna put yourself out there, how you're gonna market it, and how you're gonna get the business in. There is a book, it's probably a little dated right now because I think the latest version was like 2006, but it's by Jay Foonberg. It's how to start and run a law practice. I bought that and I did read that before I started, so that is like a good resource for it. I would definitely do something like that. Try to meet some other attorneys in the area and kind of talk to them too about it. I mean, a good resource for me was an attorney in this area who's pretty well known as Lee Perlman. He was kind of like a big brother to me. He helped me develop my firm and kind of get off the ground. And you'll find too, a lot of attorneys that have decent reputations like that, they're willing to help you out and get you off your feet. I mean, they're going to be your competitors, but there's a lot to go around. And as you're building up your practice and everything, like I said, you're going to have situations where you have a conflict of interest or something in a case you can't take. So you're going to send it to your friends, right? And you're not going to send it to people who are constantly being abrasive or fighting with you. So you do want that as well. So I think that's kind of about it and how we've kind of got to where we're at. Any questions about how to start a law firm or any particular things, anything about our practice areas we have? So we primarily do criminal defense, family, and auto accidents. Any questions? No? Yeah.
I have a question. So, I actually worked for Lee Perlman for about a year.
Yeah.
My question is, you left the state attorney's office, you want to do your own thing, how were you able to do that financially? Initially, did you take out your loan? Did you work with your house?
No, yeah.
Get off the ground to have a business office space?
No, that's a good question. And that is something you're going to have to kind of plan out too. And that's what I'm, I guess, kind of referring to. You got to have some kind of vision on how you're going to do this, right? So another great benefit of working at the state is you work there, you build up kind of a reputation, but you're also obviously getting paid for what you're doing. Try to put away as much money as you can. I mean, I had probably saved up about 15 grand just from working there. I actually got a loan from my grandfather, which he charged me 6% interest on it. So it wasn't certainly like free money or anything. But I got a loan from him. I paid him back in less than a year. We wrote out a contract and everything. Like I said, I come from family of business owners. And you gotta assess it and you gotta kind of do that. And that's another reason I would say read that book by Jay Foonberg, because it kind of like talks about that and how you would have to build that up. I mean, you're going to need a few things. One, your startup capital, right? So you're going to need some money to buy your office equipment, get an office. It's becoming more and more popular to run it out of your house. I don't know how I feel about that particularly. I don't know that especially if you're doing criminal defense, that you really want people knowing like where your house is and everything. But you know, you want to kind of plan these things out. You need that startup capital. I mean, my first month in business, when you look at, so when you get like QuickBooks, right, and it's going to lay out all your expenses and everything, and you put it in there and you see, you know, I spent like 18 grand the first month to get everything up and running. And it's like my revenue for that first month was $800. And when you see you're upside down that much, you're like, oh my God, is this going to work? You know? So yeah, definitely you need some money to live on, to survive on while you're getting it up and going. And it's tough too. I mean, you're in a way better position, I think, if you build up somewhat of a reputation. But if you're also like from this area, that's a huge, you know, benefit to it too. I mean, sometimes I think back, like, should I have gone? I mean, the issue is I came here, right? And I built up a reputation here. So going back home to Jupiter, where my family and everything is, yeah, I do think about that from time to time. Like, there's a lot more connections and stuff, and they've been working there, and they would have known a lot of people. And that's always a good network to have to kind of build some business in too. So you got to balance these things. You got to plan that out. You got to really think about it. It's tough too. And, you know, even the way I did it just 5 years ago, because I did it in 2018, the way the marketing and everything has changed so much, and it's going to change again because they're going to have artificial intelligence and stuff like that's going to start being a huge part of Google. And like, I have no idea how that's going to turn out. And you got to be a little bit of a tech guy too on this, because you're going to have to constantly like be up on all this stuff. Like when I started, there was a lot of these leads type things you could purchase. You could do these networking events. You could pay for pay-per-click, which are the like ads on like Google when you search like attorney near me and it pops up there. A lot of that stuff's gone away, really, even in the 5 years I've done it. So it's changed a ton. But yeah, knowing guys like Lee Perlman, I mean, talking to him, because he's about 5 years older than me. So he's given me a ton of advice and kind of building it up from there. So it is tough. And like, if I were to tell you right now, you know, 3 years from now or whatever, if you guys try to go out and set up a law firm, it's probably going to be a lot different again. So again, talk to a lot of people, really have a good game plan before you do it. Don't go out there and risk all your, you know, life savings up to that point, not having any idea what you're going to be doing, you know. Any other questions? Yeah.
What is advice that you wish someone had given you?
Probably about how different it's going to be from law school, I guess, and just like kind of setting you up for that. I mean, so Anthony told me not to tell the story. I'm going to tell it anyway. But so when you do all these, you know, trial competitions and everything, everyone's got these like scripts and everything, and you're trying to score your points and do what you're doing on it. But when you get into the real life of it, it's way different. So the first time, this was actually when I was a CLI, so I wasn't even an attorney yet. I jumped on this domestic battery case. We were trying to, you know, get this ready for trial. I'm talking to the victim. She's telling me it. She seems super credible on the phone. Like everything seems great. You know, she had some transportation issues. So we like set up a cab for her and all this stuff. We're all ready for trial. I got everything squared away, just like I would for a competition or something like that. And, you know, the cab pulls up that morning. They're like, we dropped her off. And I'm like, all right, great. So I'm sitting there, and in Fort Myers where I did it, I'm looking down from the windows there, and you can actually see when people are coming into the building. And I see her coming in. Everything looks great. She's here on time. You know, we're going to get ready. 45 minutes goes by, and I'm looking at my watch. I'm like, what happened to this lady? Like, where is she at? And all of a sudden, she comes down the hallway, and she's staggering and clearly under the influence. And we get in there. I start trying to talk to her about it. And like just mid-sentence, she just nods off, like, right, like talking to me about it. And I'm like, oh my God. And so we're sitting there talking to the prosecutor, and she's like, there's no way we can go to trial on this. Like, you can't put her on the stand. And then while we're talking about this, she just wakes up and finishes her sentence right where she left off. And so like, that's real life. Like, you get out there, and it is not as scripted and everything. And witnesses are not going to be reliable. They're going to say, you know, I think one of my old bosses, Frank Piazza, when I was at the state, says they kind of give you little gems while you're cross-examining them, right? So just listen for like weird stuff they say and jump all over that, especially if you're, you know, crossing them and you're trying to attack their credibility or something. Like, they're going to say something weird and then just grab onto that. And that's the best thing you can do from there. But yeah, I would say that's definitely something I wish people would have told me more, is just how much different it is when you get out there in real life, and just how much you're going to encounter some weird stuff. I mean, even Anthony interning us here, I think the first stand your ground motion he came to watch, like the victim in that case was like getting out of the stand like he was going to fist fight me in the middle of the courtroom. So that got pretty intense too. So yeah, there's definitely some exciting stuff that happens while you're out there. Anybody else? Yeah.
So yeah, you mentioned that you, Kevin, and Nick are all friends and you're all working together.
Yeah.
Could you kind of like explain the difference between working with people that you're close with and friends with, in
Yeah.
comparison to working with people that you might not be as close with, might be a little more adversarial?
Yeah, and that's another great thing with the state, right? Is because the state, in a way, is a little bit, the state or the public defender's office is a little bit of an extension of law school, because you're all going to be coming out with about the same level of experience and everything. You're going to talk to each other. You're going to kind of develop as attorneys together, and that's a great way to do it. And you're going to find other attorneys you don't agree with or probably do things you wouldn't do it that way. And you kind of develop some friendships. And I mean, even at the state, I mean, there's the three of us together, but I mean, I have probably lifelong friends from there, and you really become part of the legal community in a good way there. So that's definitely a big part of it. And then, yeah, especially if you're going into business with somebody, like you need to be able to trust them and you need to be close to them and you need to really think about it, because it is hard going into business with your friends and stuff too. But like with Nick and with Kevin, like these are guys I can trust with anything, right? And we got to know each other pretty well at the state. We've done a lot of work together, a lot of trials together. You get to know somebody pretty well that way. And you got to really be comfortable with it because, as Nick said, right? I mean, he left a pretty big job at Banker Lopez to come and jump on there to, do the firm with me and stuff. So you got to be able to take that into consideration. I mean, that's, his livelihood and his, 3 kids and his wife and everything all depend on that too. So you got to get into business with people you really trust and you really know. And, I wouldn't be doing it with people that you're might be questionable about or you have some unknowns, I guess, with. So yeah, for sure, that's a big, Any other questions? No? Yeah.
How is your time split between the business aspect of, keeping your firm running versus taking cases, and
Yeah.
what kind of adjustment did you have to do?
So we're always constantly kind of dealing with it. That's always like a big part of it, right? So kind of like I said, being a good attorney is probably like 5th on the list. So like you're going to have to be an accountant, you're going to have to be a salesperson, you're going to have to learn marketing and kind of tech stuff. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. And what we've kind of learned over time is like we have to set aside certain times that we call like firm meeting times where we're going to sit down and like really game plan what are the next things we're going to do to keep this growing. Because look, I mean, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? So like you have to keep the business growing. You have to keep expanding. You have to keep paying attention to what it is. And these marketing things, here's the other thing. When you get out there, everybody in the world is going to try to sell you some kind of magic bullet that's going to bring your firm, make you a millionaire overnight. I can't tell you how many like telemarketers we get a day that are trying to sell us some kind of marketing program or something like that. And a lot of them are not good. Like you're going to waste a lot of money and you can get burned on that. That's another thing, talking to other attorneys about that and what have they tried and what works and that kind of stuff. And it's always changing. Like sometimes like the Google pay-per-click, those ads at the top of it where you click on that and that drives a lot of business to you, that changed. I mean, that was a big moneymaker when we first started of getting leads in and signing people up. But I mean, that's kind of gone away, and that's just, you're throwing money away after a while on it. So you have to always constantly kind of be paying attention to what's working, what's not. I'm a big numbers guy because, like I said, I was an economics major. So I'm constantly running the numbers of like, where are we getting the return on investment? Where are we seeing the most profit on things that are coming in? And then constantly adjusting to it. So yeah, it is, and it's a big, and it's hard because like maybe you're preparing for some, 3 or 4 day trial that's coming up. And at the same time, you got to be balancing it with that stuff. So it is tough. My general advice is kind of maybe try what we're doing is like set aside a time where you're going to sit down and really look at those numbers and really put some effort and thought into what you're going to do. And you have to set it aside because it's so easy to get bogged down in the day-to-day stuff that you're doing and not and ignore all that stuff. And you don't want to do that. So sure. Yeah.
Follow-up question. You had a background in business. You said your family had some, and you were
It might be a little bit of both. I mean, so yeah, it definitely helps me a lot. These guys have jumped on. I mean, they weren't business majors or anything like that too. And I mean, definitely teaching a lot of the stuff to Nick when he first joined on. I don't think he's heard of half of the things we were talking about, the marketing ideas and things like that. So it is something you got to learn, and you got to learn how to run a business. And I mean, there's ways to do it, right, without knowing how to do it in advance. Like, I mean, you can hire bookkeepers and things like that, but it's going to get more expensive too. So the more you can kind of do on your own, the better it is. I mean, there's certainly ways to learn it. It's probably a steep learning curve when you're leaving your job and you don't know where your next paycheck's going to come from unless you're like making it yourself. I mean, it definitely, it gets tough doing that. So you want to have a plan, like I said, when you start. But yeah, I mean, you can definitely learn it. And again, like, the best resources are other attorneys in the area, and like how they do it and how they market their firms, and what works and what doesn't, and having a relationship with attorneys that are willing to help you, even if they're your competition. And a lot of them are like that. Like Perlman's like that. There's a lot of attorneys, they're like that in the area. I'm like that. I mean, if you are, go out and start your own thing, if you're somebody in the legal community, you're always welcome to ask me questions about things. And because building those relationships and having a good relationship with other attorneys is a great way to generate more business too in the long run too, right? Because there's more people and more opportunities it's going to give you. So, yeah.
I know you said how like each of you guys do your own like area of the law, but is it more set up where you just focus on your own area, or is it more of like a teamwork sort of thing where like you guys kind of help out in the various areas?
Yeah, so a little bit of both, right? So, I mean, we do try to keep it to each one of us kind of does your practice area, but we also do obviously help each other out with it. I go to trial pretty frequently, so I do get these guys always sit second chair. I mean, you can do trials on your own, but it's tough, right? You always want somebody there probably to at least assist you and help you out with it, and then listen to things from a different angle too, because when you're in the heat of the moment and everything, you want somebody else to like how they're listening to it and how they think the trial's going, and you kind of can communicate back and forth, and then it's much more effective what you're, having different opinions about the trial live while it's happening. But yeah, I mean, like, we definitely will assist each other and cover it. And another big thing too is talking about balance of time and stuff too, is like, I would recommend about 3 months, at least take 4 or 5 days off. I mean, you are going to get burned out. Being a lawyer, you guys are already here, so you're already stuck. You got to do it. It is a tough job, and you are going to go through a lot of stress and a lot of, it'll burn you out. I'll just put it that way. So you do need to make sure that you take some time off and do it. Now, you shouldn't take that the wrong way and be like, oh, you should be taking vacations and stuff all the time, because you're probably not going to succeed if you do that. But I'd say about every 3 months or so, you should at least get out of the office for a little while, because it'll burn you up and eat you up, and you don't want to do that. And you're way more productive too if you can get away and just kind of, relax once in a while and kind of center yourself again, and remember what's really important stuff, and not get bogged down in your client's problems, your business problems, the judge's problems, the opposing counsel's problems. It will burn you out. So take some time off from time to time too. Yeah.
As an attorney, what do you think is kind of the leadership skill that you've developed the most since you started practicing, and what is one that you still think that you need to like kind of work on?
I'd say one that's just always an issue is like, you're gonna have ups and downs too. Like, you're gonna have boom months and you're gonna have bust months, and you're gonna have, especially when you first start out. Like I said, the first month when you make like $800 and you spend all this money to get the office up and running, and like, it hurts sometimes. You sit there and you're on a roller coaster ride of your emotions, and it's hard to kind of level that out. And the best way to do that is to have a vision again, and have some purpose and something you're trying to work toward, and constantly always framing it, and like, I'm building something here. This month might be down, next month might be up. I mean, when you start, you're going to have months where like all of a sudden you made a ton of money this month, next month you make nothing, or you're losing money and you're having to put money back into the business. So that levels out over time, but it never quite goes away. I was just talking to a friend of mine, Mark, who's been in business for 17 years, and he was talking about how he's having like one of the best years of his practice, but then he had one random month where he lost $30,000 in 1 month, right? So, I mean, that's 17 years into it. So there's going to be ups and downs, and it's hard to kind of when you're having that bad month, you're not going to feel great about it. And you got to be able to frame that back into like, look, this isn't every month and it's going to get better from here. And when you're having that good month, don't blow all your money and don't spend it all. Put it aside and be responsible and have it ready for that bad month. So it's definitely a skill that you got to learn, and you got to be able to deal with the ups and downs of it for sure. Anybody else? Yeah.
Changing gears a bit. So I know you said earlier that you were never going to do criminal law.
Yeah.
Did anything in particular drive you to that?
Well, so to be honest, like, while I was like kind of the true believer, like, pro law enforcement, I'm going to be the state attorney. And until you work your way up to a certain point, and then it's like, well, I'm not making a ton. I'm sitting here trying murders, making like not that great of money. A lot of my friends are doing a lot better. I made friends with a lot of defense attorneys. I was in a fantasy football league with a bunch of them. And I think that's what really kind of changed it, is because you're talking to them about it and how everything's changing. And then Perlman was in that one. If any of you guys are friends with him on Facebook, you see that kind of stuff all the time. But, that changes your perspective, and then you soften to the idea of it. And, here's the other thing too. And that, kind of going back to like getting along with everybody, like these offices here in Pinellas, they are very like, if you're at the public defender's office and you're at the state, a little bit of leadership kind of has you guys butt heads a lot. And I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing. Like at the time when you're a first new lawyer and they're like amping you up to go to trial, and like they're, whatever side you're on, the other side's the bad guys, you got to win, blah, blah, blah. But now, like looking back after years of that, I'm friends with most of the public defenders I used to go against, and we used to get in kind of heated arguments. But then when you it changes your perspective, especially if you've done both sides of it, which I highly recommend. Like, in a way, it's probably impossible to do it on like that much of a macro level, but like our society in general would probably be better off if we're more like JAG attorneys, where you do a rotation through defense and prosecuting it, and you kind of had some idea of both sides of it. Because until you see a client, until you get that human aspect of it, there's probably a tendency to be a lot harder than you would be, and kind of forget about those stuff from time to time. But also, like, you can't be a true believer the other way too far either, because then you're gonna not put things into perspective. Like, sometimes people are a danger to society, and like they need to be, locked up sometimes. So it's definitely probably a lot better perspective now, having done both sides. I think I'm way more moderated, I guess, on a lot of that stuff. So, anybody else? No? How are we doing on time? Good? All right. Well, thanks for having me, and hopefully some good advice for you. And